Isaiah Fuller sat motionless in the back seat of his car, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen of his phone. A customer review stared back at him like a blade pressed against his chest. Rude staff, refused service, never coming back. Another review, just as cold, had been posted days earlier. Felt completely unwelcome, do better. His stomach twisted into a knot. 7 years ago, Isaiah had poured everything, his savings, his time, his heart, into buying the juice bar chain. To him, it had never just been a business. It was a mission. He believed in health, in freshness, in creating spaces where people felt cared for the moment they walked through the door. But lately, something had gone very wrong. One of the stores had started showing sharp drops in sales. Customer complaints were stacking up like warning lights on a dashboard. When Isaiah questioned the regional manager, the response had been vague and dismissive. Probably just some tough customers. Nothing to worry about. But Isaiah knew better. You don't get smoke without a fire. He had built this company with his own hands, with sweat and purpose and late nights spent obsessing over details most executives would overlook. He wasn't going to sit back and watch it rot from the inside. So he made a decision. He let his beard grow out, ditched the tailored suits for an old hoodie and worn-out jeans. He threw on thick-rimmed glasses that gave him the look of a man no one would recognize. Because at this location, no one had ever seen him in person. Sure, his face was on the website, but most frontline staff didn't have direct interaction with corporate. Today, he wouldn't walk in as the owner. He would walk in as just another customer. Stepping out of his car, Isaiah approached the storefront. The familiar green and orange signage was still there, but something felt off. The glass door was smudged with fingerprints. The trash can outside overflowed with empty cups and food wrappers. A chill crept up his spine. This wasn't the place he had built. He pushed open the door. Inside, it looked clean enough. Floors swept, counters wiped, but the atmosphere was hollow. Cold. The energy felt absent, like the soul of the store had quietly slipped away. Behind the counter, a young man, name tag reading Troy, was glued to his phone, barely glancing up. A teenage girl behind him was slowly wiping down a blender, her movements robotic, as if counting the seconds until she could clock out. Isaiah quietly joined the line behind an elderly woman wearing a faded, hand-knit sweater. She fumbled through her purse, her hands trembling as she pulled out a small pile of crumpled bills and loose change. Troy sighed loudly. "Ma'am, that's not enough for a smoothie." The woman looked up, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I just need something small, the smallest size you have." "No discounts," Troy snapped, not even looking at her. "If you can't pay, I can't help you." Isaiah clenched his jaw. The old woman hesitated, then slowly began putting the coins back in her purse, each motion heavy with shame. "Wait," Isaiah said, stepping forward. His voice was steady but firm. "Let me cover it." To Rose, Troy didn't even lift his head. "It's not about the money, man. We can't just be handing out freebies all the time." Isaiah ignored him. He turned toward the woman, softening his tone. "Order whatever you want. It's on me today." She looked at him, surprised, uncertain, but then offered a small, grateful smile. "A strawberry banana, please." Isaiah reached into his wallet and handed Troy a $20 bill. The cashier took it reluctantly, muttering under his breath as he lazily tapped the order into the register. The woman murmured a quiet thank you and stepped aside to wait. But Isaiah didn't move. He stared directly at Troy. "Is that how you treat all your customers?" Troy shrugged. "We get people like that all the time trying to get free stuff. If we gave it out to everyone, we'd go bankrupt." Isaiah's eyes didn't waver. Beneath his calm expression, anger was starting to build, low and controlled, but steady. She wasn't trying to get anything for free. She was trying to pay, with everything she had. Troy scoffed. "If you want to waste your money on strangers, go ahead." Isaiah didn't respond. He stepped aside and began scanning the rest of the staff. The girl wiping the blender, her name tag read Mia, was still working, but there was no spark in her eyes. At the back of the store, a tall young man was chopping fruit with visible irritation, muttering under his breath with each slice. But then Isaiah noticed something else. Someone else. A young woman in her mid-20s moved with focused energy behind the counter. Unlike the others, she wasn't dragging her feet or hiding behind her tasks. She double-checked orders, restocked supplies without being asked, and when the elderly woman's smoothie was ready, she personally carried it to her table with a gentle smile. Her name tag read Grace. The name was simple, her presence was not. Grace wasn't just doing her job. She was doing everyone's job, and doing it well. Not because anyone was watching, not because she had something to prove, but because something in her refused to let this place crumble any further. Isaiah watched her for a long moment, then quietly stepped back in line. When it was his turn, Troy didn't even lift his head. "What do you want?" "A mango pineapple smoothie," Isaiah answered, voice even. $6.50, Troy muttered, tapping the screen like it was a chore. Isaiah handed over the cash, but he wasn't done. "Not yet." Isaiah handed over the cash, then asked casually, "How long have you been working here?" Troy shrugged. "A few months. You like it?" Troy shot him a sarcastic glance. "It's just a job." Isaiah nodded, then gestured toward Grace. "What about her?" Troy let out a snort, half amused, half dismissive. "Grace? She tries way too hard, thinks she runs the place or something." Isaiah turned to look at Grace. She had just fixed a messed-up order. No one had asked her to. She didn't do it for recognition or to show off. She did it because it was the right thing to do. She wasn't acting like a manager. She was just being decent. His smoothie was ready. Isaiah stepped aside and took a sip. The flavor was fine, just like always, but the bitter taste in his mouth came from something else. Disappointment. A quiet kind that lingered. He left the store without saying another word. But in his mind, one thing had become clear. This wasn't over. The next morning, Isaiah didn't drive to corporate headquarters like usual. Instead, he returned to the store just before opening. He parked across the street and sat quietly in his car, observing. Troy showed up with his hands in his pockets, dragging his feet, but Grace was already inside, carefully arranging trays of fruit. No one had told her to. No one was watching. She just couldn't stand by while things fell apart. A few minutes later, Isaiah stepped inside. The store was still empty, just staff prepping for the day. Troy noticed him, recognition flickering in his eyes, but he said nothing. Grace, on the other hand, looked up and offered a warm smile, a genuine warmth that Isaiah hadn't seen in his stores for a long time. "Hey there," she said kindly. "We're just about to open, but if you don't mind waiting a few minutes, I can take your order." "No rush," Isaiah replied. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked over. "You came in yesterday, didn't you?" "I did," Isaiah nodded. "Wanted to get a second impression." Grace glanced over at Troy, who was sluggishly setting up the register, then turned back. "What did you think, honestly?" Isaiah paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think some people here care a lot more than others." Grace let out a soft laugh, not because she was surprised, but because the truth was too familiar. "Sounds about right. I've been here for 2 years, started part-time. Somehow ended up holding the whole place together." "You're not the manager?" Isaiah asked. Grace shook her head. "Nope, just a shift lead. Our actual manager. Well, She gave a small shrug. Some weeks she only calls in once to check the sales numbers. Isaiah's hand tightened slightly on the counter. There was supposed to be a manager here, someone responsible. But from what Grace was saying, that person had all but disappeared. A whole store left in the hands of people who didn't care, except for one woman trying desperately to keep it from collapsing. "What's her name?" Isaiah asked, his voice calm but edged with something colder. "Lisa," Grace replied. "She usually only shows up if something major happens. Otherwise, it's just us." Isaiah tucked the name away. It explained a lot. Grace tilted her head. "Why all the questions?" "I want to understand how this place really runs," Isaiah said, "not just what it looks like on a report." Grace smiled faintly. "Well, if you really want to know, come back this afternoon. Mornings are quiet. Afternoons, that's when the real show starts." Isaiah took that as a challenge. He left for a few hours, then returned just as the rush began. And within minutes, the place unraveled. The blender station backed up. Orders got mixed up. Customers stood in line, visibly frustrated. Troy was moving slowly, dragging his feet. But Grace was everywhere, remaking drinks, apologizing, calming kids on the verge of a meltdown. She didn't complain. She didn't point fingers. She just fixed things. A young mother stepped up with 2 kids in tow. She ordered 3 smoothies, then hesitated when she saw the total. She switched from a credit card to cash, carefully counting each bill. She was $1 short. Troy didn't flinch. "You're short. Gonna have to drop one." The mother looked panicked, glancing down at her kids. Before she could speak, Grace stepped forward. "I got it," she said softly, pulling $1 out of her own pocket and handing it to Troy. The mother looked at her, visibly moved. "Thank you. Really?" Grace smiled. "It's no problem." That was it for Isaiah. He stepped forward to the counter and looked Troy square in the eyes. "I need to speak to Lisa." Troy frowned. "She's not here." "Call her," Isaiah said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Troy scoffed. "She's not gonna come down here just 'cause some guy asks?" Isaiah pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a woman answered. "Lisa, this is Isaiah Fuller. I'm at your store. Get here now." There was silence, then a stammered reply. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up, tucked his phone back into his pocket. Troy's face turned pale. Grace stood frozen, eyes wide. "Phew." Isaiah nodded. "Yes, I own this entire company." The room fell into a stunned silence. Not long after, Lisa walked in, business casual, hair in a tight bun, trying to carry the air of someone in control. As soon as she spotted Isaiah, she hurried over. "Mr. Fuller, I had no idea you'd be visiting today." Isaiah didn't acknowledge the excuse. He simply gestured around the store. "This is your location, right?" Lisa nodded. "Of course." "Then why haven't you been here?" The question hit the air like a thunderclap. Lisa blinked but quickly recovered. "I check in regularly. I manage multiple locations, so I have to balance my time." Isaiah's expression didn't shift. "When's the last time you worked a full shift here?" Lisa hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. "I don't need to be here full time. That's why we have shift leads. They handle daily operations, and I step in when needed." Isaiah shifted slightly, turning his gaze toward Grace. "How often would you say she steps in when needed?" he asked. His voice wasn't confrontational, but it was clear and carried weight. Grace glanced at Lisa, then back at Isaiah. She hesitated for a second, but chose to be honest. "Not often." Lisa let out a sharp breath and crossed her arms. "That's not entirely fair. I trust my team. If anything serious was happening, I would have been told." His eyes didn't budge. "You have a cashier turning away customers because they're short a few cents. You have a team of employees who don't seem to care about service, and your shift lead," he nodded toward Grace, "is the only reason this place is even functioning. She's holding everything together, and she's not even being compensated for the weight she's carrying." Lisa opened her mouth, but Isaiah wasn't finished. "When's the last time you actually spoke to a real customer here? Not looking at sales reports, not reviewing numbers, but standing right here and hearing what it feels like to walk into this store." Lisa pressed her lips together, her expression gradually tightening. "Because I did. I watched an elderly woman get humiliated for being short on change. I watched a young mother scramble to pay for drinks for her kids. And I watched the so-called team you trust stand back and let one person run the entire store by herself." Lisa inhaled, adjusting the strap of her purse. "I'll admit I wasn't aware of those specific incidents." "That's the problem," Isaiah said, his tone low and sharp like a blade. "It's not about isolated incidents. It's about the culture you've allowed to take root. A culture of indifference, neglect, and lack of leadership." Lisa turned to Troy, who had been standing stiffly behind the counter, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Is that true, Troy?" Troy shifted uncomfortably and mumbled, "I didn't do anything wrong. I was just following policy. The register isn't a charity box, but a charity." Isaiah's gaze grew colder. "No, you're right. But this company was built on a belief that every person who walks through those doors deserves to be welcomed. We serve healthy products, and we're supposed to make people feel better when they leave than when they came in." "I didn't know that was the expectation," Troy said quietly. "You didn't know," Isaiah replied, looking at Lisa, "because no one ever told you." Lisa tightened her grip on her purse. Her voice was dry. "I'll make adjustments." "No," Isaiah said firmly, "not adjustments. Reform." He turned back to Grace. "If you've already been doing the job of a manager, then from this moment on, you are the manager, with full authority and full pay." Grace's eyes widened in shock. "And I, Isaiah gave her a reassuring nod. "Effective immediately." Then he turned to Lisa. "As for you, I don't see leadership here, I see absence." Lisa's face lost a shade of color. "I can fix this." Isaiah paused for a beat. "You will, but in a different role. From now on, you'll head up training and development. Clearly, that's an area this store has been sorely lacking in." Lisa didn't argue. She simply gave a small, stiff nod. Isaiah faced Grace again. "You have complete authority to rebuild this team, hire, train, and if needed, let people go. Anyone who doesn't meet the new standard no longer has a place here." Troy swallowed hard and nodded quickly. A heavy silence settled across the store. No one said a word, but the shift in atmosphere was unmistakable. Something had just been broken, and something stronger had just begun to take its place. Grace stood motionless, stunned. Isaiah stepped closer, his voice steady but gentle. "From now on, you report directly to me. No filters. If something's wrong, I want to hear it from you, not a sugar-coated report." Grace slowly nodded. This time, there was no hesitation in her eyes, only determination. Lisa spoke up, her tone composed. "I'll make sure the transition goes smoothly." Isaiah didn't take his eyes off Grace. "You have full authority to change what needs changing, even the environment here. If someone isn't willing to step up, they shouldn't be here." Grace bit her lip, then replied quietly, "If I'm going to take this role, I want to do it right. That means changing more than just the people. It means changing how we operate." Isaiah nodded. "What do you need?" Grace looked around the store, her gaze sharp and focused. "Training. Right now, new employees get thrown into the job with no real guidance. Some people care, others don't, because no one's ever told them what matters." Lisa nodded. "That's something I can help with." Isaiah looked directly at her. That's your job now. Grace continued, more confident now. We also need to rethink how we treat customers. I understand we have policies, but we can't treat people like a burden just because they're short on change. If we want them to come back, they need to feel welcome. Isaiah gestured for her to go on. Grace took a deep breath. And honestly, the whole vibe of this place needs to change. It's not welcoming. Employees move like machines. Customers come and go, and no one remembers anyone's face. That's the result of how this place is run. Isaiah scanned the space in silence. She was right. The store wasn't dirty, but it was cold, emotionless. There was no connection, no warmth. And if that wasn't addressed soon, it would destroy everything he'd worked so hard to build. How would you change that? He asked. Grace didn't need to think. Hire the right people, the ones who want to be here. Train them not just on how to make smoothies, but on how to connect with customers. Teach them how to talk, how to notice things, how to care. And most importantly, set clear standards so no one is allowed to just coast. Isaiah's face lit up with quiet approval. Do it, he said. Lisa took a sharp breath, like she was about to protest, but in the end, she said nothing. Isaiah turned to Troy. One last time. You've got two choices. Step up, do the job the way this company was meant to be run, or walk away. Troy stood frozen, his lips pressed tight. I didn't know what I was supposed to do before. Isaiah cut him off, not harshly but with undeniable clarity. Well, now you do. Troy swallowed hard and nodded. This time, there was no resistance. Isaiah looked back at Grace, his voice calm but filled with conviction. You have full authority to decide who stays and who goes. If someone doesn't align with the values we're working toward here, don't hesitate to replace them with someone who does. Grace's expression hardened, a new strength rising behind her eyes. I can do that? Isaiah gave a small nod of approval. Then today is officially your first day as manager. Lisa shifted slightly, her voice steady but clearly shaken inside. I'll start restructuring the training program right away. Isaiah met her gaze. Good. But I expect results, not promises. Lisa nodded, this time with the recognition of someone who finally understood the stakes. Isaiah exhaled, slowly glancing around the store. The tension hadn't disappeared, but something had shifted. The silence that remained wasn't one of apathy. It was the stillness of change taking root. He turned to Grace again, his tone gentler. Make this place into what it was always meant to be. She looked at him, no longer hesitant like she was that morning, but steady, grounded, like someone who had finally stepped into the role she was meant for. I will. Isaiah stayed longer than he had planned. He kept to the background, watching, not interfering. Grace had already gotten to work. She didn't bark orders or act superior. She moved with quiet intention. She delegated, corrected mistakes, and began setting a new rhythm for the entire team. The changes were subtle at first, but they were undeniable. Lisa stood off to the side, notebook in hand, observing and writing. She didn't speak up, but Isaiah knew she was still wrestling with the reality that she was no longer in charge. Now she had to prove she could contribute, or prove she no longer belonged in a leadership role at all. Troy was different too. The arrogance he carried earlier was gone. He followed directions and carried out tasks with a subdued demeanor, like someone unsure of who he was anymore, in the wake of everything that had happened. Isaiah stayed back, giving Grace the space to lead. He needed to see whether she was truly ready. She was. She identified bottlenecks in workflow almost immediately and acted. Mia, who had spent the entire morning mindlessly wiping down already clean counters, was reassigned to prepping ingredients. It was a direct, useful role, and it changed everything. She perked up, her posture straighter. She had purpose now. She was contributing. Race wasn't just managing, she was leading. Isaiah turned his attention toward the customers. The atmosphere had shifted again. Lighter, more fluid. Staff greeted guests the way they should. Orders were processed more efficiently. The awkward barrier between customer and counter had begun to fade. A man in a construction uniform walked up to the register, studying the menu. Then, clearly uncomfortable, he pulled out a handful of coins and a couple of wrinkled bills. Troy glanced at the money, then at the total. Isaiah held his breath, a silent test. Troy inhaled slowly, then straightened up. "You're short about 90 cents, but don't worry about it." He reached into the tip jar, pulled out the difference and dropped it into the register before finalizing the order. The man blinked in surprise, then gave Troy a thankful nod. "Thanks, ma'am." Troy simply nodded back, saying nothing. But Isaiah had seen what he needed to see. He looked over at Grace. She had seen it too. Once the line died down, she approached Troy. "It was good," she said. Her tone wasn't overly complimentary, just honest, measured. Troy shrugged, scratching the back of his neck. Didn't seem worth making a big deal over a few cents. Ray studied him for a second. "You want to keep working here?" Troy paused, then nodded. "Yeah, then keep doing that." He nodded again and turned back to the register just as another wave of customers began to roll in. Isaiah turned to Lisa, who was still near the back with her notebook. "What's your take?" Lisa let out a slow breath. "It's not where it needs to be yet, but I can already see the difference." "You're going to need to do more than just observe," Isaiah replied. "You need to build a system strong enough that this never happens again, not just here, but across every location." Lisa nodded. This time it was the nod of someone who fully grasped the magnitude of what lay ahead. He looked back at Grace. "You're going to need more people. Bring in the right ones." Grace nodded confidently. "Already have a few in mind. Some of them used to work here. They left because they couldn't deal with how things were run. If they knew things were different now, I think they'd come back." Isaiah's eyes softened. "And bring them back." "I will." The store settled into a rare moment of stillness. Not a pause filled with pressure, but one that felt full of potential, like fertile ground waiting for something better to grow. Isaiah turned slowly toward the door. His work here wasn't finished. But the wheels of change were turning, and this time he wasn't going to let them stop. Not again. Not while he still had the power to make it right.